The town of Oakhaven was small, quiet, peaceful. Nestled in a valley, it was a place where everyone knew each other and life moved at a gentle pace. The streets were lined with quaint houses, and the air was filled with the scent of blooming flowers in the spring and the crispness of fallen leaves in the autumn. At least that's what everyone said. The townsfolk would gather at the local diner, exchanging pleasantries and sharing the latest gossip. They spoke of their children, their gardens, and the weather. But there was one topic that was always avoided, one place that was never mentioned in these cheerful conversations. But on the edge of town, hidden behind a rusted iron fence, Whispering Pines Cemetery held its breath. It was a place shrouded in mystery and fear, a stark contrast to the otherwise idyllic town. The iron gate, once grand, now stood as a decaying sentinel, guarding the secrets within. Ancient trees twisted over crumbling headstones. Their gnarled branches seemed to reach out as if trying to escape the confines of the cemetery. The headstones, worn by time and weather, bore names long forgotten, their inscriptions barely legible. Their branches clawed at the silence. The wind would occasionally rustle through the leaves, creating an eerie whisper that seemed to carry the voices of the past. It was as if the trees themselves were trying to tell the stories of those buried beneath them. No one dared go near the place, not anymore. The path leading to the cemetery was overgrown with weeds and brambles, a natural barrier that kept the curious at bay. The few who had ventured there spoke of an overwhelming sense of dread, a feeling that they were being watched. The old folks whispered stories, tales passed down through generations, each more chilling than the last. They spoke of strange lights seen at night, of ghostly figures that roamed the grounds, and of a presence that could be felt but not seen. Stories about a screaming soul trapped forever, a soul that could not find peace, its cries echoing through the night. Some said it was the spirit of a wronged woman. Others believed it was a restless child, but no one knew for sure. Stories that made your skin crawl. The kind of tales that kept you awake at night, listening for the slightest sound. The kind that made you pull the covers up to your chin and pray for morning to come. The graveyard had been abandoned for decades, forgotten. Left to the elements, it had become a place of decay and desolation. The once carefully tended graves were now overrun with wild plants, their beauty lost to time, left to decay beneath the weight of its secrets. Secrets that the town preferred to forget, to bury along with the bodies. But the cemetery would not be silenced. It held on to its stories, waiting for someone brave enough to uncover them. Everyone knew it was haunted. It was an unspoken truth, a shadow that loomed over the town, and so Whispering Pines Cemetery remained, a silent witness to the passage of time, its secrets whispered by the wind and the trees. Jonathan Cross was a wicked man, a man whose very name sent shivers down the spines of those who knew of his deeds. A thief, a grave robber. He was known to lurk in the shadows, waiting for the cover of night to carry out his nefarious activities. He plundered the graves of the rich and the unfortunate alike. No tombstone was safe from his greedy hands. He took what wasn't his, desecrating the final resting places of many. He cared nothing for the sanctity of the dead. To him, the graveyard was just another place to find treasure, a place where the dead could no longer protect their possessions, only for the glint of gold. The shimmer of precious metals and jewels was all that mattered to him. His eyes would light up with a sinister gleam whenever he unearthed a new find. One night, Jonathan's luck ran out. The moon was full, casting an eerie glow over the graveyard. The air was thick with an unnatural silence. Caught in the act, he tried to escape. Panic set in as he realized he was not alone. The shadows seemed to come alive, reaching out to him, ran deeper into the graveyard. The further he went, the more the darkness seemed to close in around him. His breath came in ragged gasps as he stumbled over the uneven ground. But the shadows had other plans. They say he tripped. Some believe it was the spirits of those he had wronged, seeking their revenge, fell on his own shovel. The very tool he used to desecrate the graves became the instrument of his demise. The iron blade pierced his heart. In an instant, his life was snuffed out, leaving him to face the consequences of his actions in the afterlife. Jonathan Cross died the way he lived, alone. His body lay lifeless in the cold, unfeeling ground, surrounded by the very graves he had once plundered, in the cold embrace of whispering pines. The graveyard, once a place of fear for others, became his eternal prison. His soul, unable to find peace, was trapped. The spirits of the dead, angered by his actions, refused to let him rest. Forever bound to the graveyard he defiled. Whispering Pines became a place of legend, where the restless spirit of Jonathan Cross roamed, a cautionary tale for those who dared to disturb the dead. Strange things happened at Whispering Pines. People said they heard whispers on the wind, voices calling out from beyond the grave. Some saw flickering lights moving between the trees. Others felt a cold breath on the back of their necks. No one dared to investigate. The stories were enough. The legend of Jonathan Cross loomed over the town, a constant reminder that some sins can't be buried. It was a Friday night, and a group of teenagers stood outside the cemetery gates. The air was thick with anticipation and a hint of fear. The moon cast eerie shadows on the ground, making the iron gates look even more foreboding. They were restless, bored. The usual hangouts had lost their charm, and the night seemed to stretch endlessly before them. Some kicked at the dirt while others stared at their phones, hoping for a distraction, looking for something to do, anything to break the monotony. Their small town offered little in the way of excitement, and they were desperate for a thrill, something to break the monotony of their small town lives. The same streets, the same faces, the same stories. They craved something different, something that would make this night unforgettable. Then someone mentioned the legend of the screaming soul, a ghost story that had been passed down through generations. It was said that the soul of a wronged woman roamed the cemetery, screaming for justice. "I dare you to go in there," Jake said, his voice barely a whisper. The challenge hung in the air, daring anyone to back down. The group fell silent, the weight of the dare pressing down on them. He pointed towards the rusted iron gates. The others shifted nervously. The gates seemed to creak in the wind as if inviting them in. The stories of the screaming soul echoed in their minds. They had all heard the stories, tales of eerie wails and ghostly apparitions. Some said they were just myths, but others swore they had seen the ghostly figure themselves. But tonight, curiosity outweighed fear. The thrill of the unknown was too tempting to resist. They exchanged glances, each one silently daring the other to take the first step. They were determined to prove their bravery to each other, to themselves. With a deep breath, they stepped through the gates, the world of the living fading behind them as they entered the realm of the dead. The cemetery was silent, save for the rustling of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound amplified in the stillness of the night. They walked deeper into the graveyard, hearts pounding, eyes wide with a mix of fear and excitement. This was their night, a night they would never forget. Section 5. Shadows and Screams. The air grew colder as they pushed open the creaking gates. The full moon cast an eerie glow over the crooked headstones. Shadows danced around their feet, twisting and turning, mocking them. "Do you hear that?" whispered Emily, her eyes wide with fear. A low moan echoed through the graveyard. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. The teenagers exchanged nervous glances, their hearts pounded in their chests. Section 6. The Ghostly Touch. The moaning grew louder, closer. They stumbled through the darkness, their flashlight beams cutting through the thick fog that had descended upon them. Suddenly, a cold hand clasped Michael's shoulder from behind. He screamed, whirling around to face his attacker, but there was no one there, only the shadows swirling around him like phantoms. His friends stared at him in disbelief, their faces pale in the moonlight. Section 7, fleeing in terror. Then they heard it. A blood-curdling scream. Filled with rage and torment, it pierced the night. Echoing through the ancient trees, Jonathan Cross was angry. Panic surged through the group. They didn't need to be told twice. They turned and ran. Branches whipped at their faces. Thorns tore at their clothes, but they didn't stop. Not until they were safely outside the cemetery gates. They slammed the gates shut behind them. The screaming stopped. Silence descended once more. Section 8. The morning after. The next morning, the sun painted the town in a warm glow. But the events of the previous night still lingered in the minds of the teenagers. They couldn't shake the feeling that they had been watched, hunted. They met at their usual spot, the diner on Main Street. Their faces were drawn, their eyes bloodshot. They spoke in hushed tones, recounting the horrors they had witnessed, each detail more terrifying than the last. Section 9. The town holds its breath. Word of their encounter spread through Oakhaven like wildfire. The legend of the screaming soul was no longer just a story, it was real, and it was closer than they thought. The townspeople were afraid. They avoided the cemetery at all costs. Even during the day, they steered clear of its rusted gates. The memory of the teenagers' screams hung heavy in the air. Section 10. Forever haunted. The graveyard remained untouched and eerie, a constant reminder of the darkness that lay at the edge of town. And every now and then, when the wind was right, people swore they could still hear it, the faint echo of a scream, a soul forever tormented and lost. Whispering Pine Cemetery had claimed another victim. Their fear was palpable. Like and subscribe for more chilling tales.